I believe that if we're sober, if we don't fall down the neck of a bottle, that the universe has a better imagination than we do, and remarkable things happen, surprising things happen. I am awakened to a wonder, and that wasn't the way I was. I was very prescriptive when I was drinking and working very hard and coming home to unhitch my shoulders from my earlobes with my first glass of wine, often with my coat still on. This is a richer way of living. I am a seasoned journalist who got into trouble with alcohol and wrote my book 10 years ago. My book being Drink, the Intimate Relationship Between Women and Alcohol, which is a bestseller. And I did a concurrent TEDx talk that has 1.5 million views
Yeah.
on alcohol and how it changed my life. At 64, I went back to school to become a psychotherapist. And I work mostly with women and substance issues and trauma. And I also teach a memoir writing course called Writing Your Recovery because I missed my journalism and my writing. So I've cobbled together a very rich life.
Yeah.
I'm 70 and I have no intention of slowing down, and I'm in Toronto, Canada.
Fantastic. I've just reread your book. I read it when it must have been quite new because I'd just given up drinking, and you know what that's like, those early stages. I was raw.
Yeah.
And I read the book, and obviously I enjoyed it and I got a lot from it. But then I read it a couple of days ago at 8 years sober, and it it just struck me in such a different way, such a rich
Oh,
way, especially the bit at the end about the healing and how you're finding spirituality. I got so much from it this time. It made me realize how I've grown over these years and changed, and your TED Talk as well, I rewatched that, and you were saying something about you might not get employed again, but really with your life, that's the last thing you want, isn't it? To be employed. You've built a beautiful life for yourself.
yes, I have built a beautiful life, and I just want to congratulate you. That's significant sobriety. And I know I'm coming to see you in the fall, spring for you, to return to South Africa, where I lived for a couple of years as a child. So it's especially meaningful for me to do this podcast with you.
Okay, let's go back to the book. You promised to read me some of the prologue because I just love the prologue. Over to
All
you.
right. All right. Hang out in the brightly lit rooms of AA or in coffee shops, talking to dozens of women who've given up drinking. And this is the conclusion you come to. For most, booze is a loan shark, someone they trusted for a while, came to count on before it turned ugly. Every person with a drinking problem learns this the hard way. And no matter what the circumstances, certain parts of the story are always the same. Here's how the story goes. At first, alcohol is that elegant figure standing in the corner by the bar, the handsome one in the beautiful black tuxedo. Or maybe he's in black leather and jeans. It doesn't matter. You can't miss him. He's always at the party, and he always gets there first. Maybe you first saw him in high school. Many do. Others meet him long before. He finds his moment sometime when you're wobbly or nervous, excited or scared. You're heading into a big party or a dance, and all of a sudden your stomach begins to lurch. You're overdressed or underdressed or too tall, too short, heartsick, or heart in your mouth anxious. Doesn't matter. Booze wastes no time. He sidles up with a quick hit of courage. You grab it. It feels good. It works. Or maybe you've fallen in love. You're at a wedding, a dinner, a celebration. You want this moment to last. You fear it won't. Just as your doubts begin to get the best of you, booze holds out a glass, a slim stem of liquid swagger, pale blonde and bubbly. You take a sip, and instantly the room begins to soften. So do you. Your toes curl a little. Your heart is light. All things are possible. Now this is a sweetheart deal.
Beautiful. Yes, in Tribe Sober, we write our goodbye to alcohol letters. So that's a similar premise. We just want to get this abusive lover out of our lives.
Yeah.
So Drink, your book Drink, must mention the title in case anyone hasn't read it yet. You lay the groundwork really for much of the modern recovery movement. I think it must have been one of the first quit lit books out there. And your prediction, of course, was that there would be a huge rise in risky drinking for women. So how's that prediction come true 10 years later?
Sadly, really tragically, it's all come true and more. We have an epidemic, certainly during the pandemic, of female drinking. We now have just announced in the past 12 months enormous numbers of young women having liver disease in their 20s, young women outpacing young men in terms of presentation at emergency rooms. Men still outdrink us, but we're catching up. In certain age groups, we are dying faster. And I think the most profound thing is that democratically we're equal, but we are not equal when it comes to the health issues around alcohol. It's much more dangerous for us. And I think this is serious. So it was serious in my book 10 years ago, but we're catching up to that information, up to the information of connecting the dots with breast cancer, connecting the dots with colorectal cancer.
Yeah, I had breast cancer, which was no doubt linked to my decades of heavy drinking. Many women in our tribe have had breast cancer. And I think you mentioned the younger women, which is tragic. In the UK, women with liver disease in their 20s, it's appalling. But then alcohol is cheaper than orange juice in the UK. So that's going to
It's
happen, isn't
terrible,
it?
terrible.
Yeah. I think as we get older as well, it's like the chickens come home to roost, even if we haven't been crazy when we were younger. Gradually, all that steady drinking over the decades, it catches up with us. And that's where the breast cancer comes in. I think alcohol related deaths have increased for older women.
Yes, they have. They have. And it's a picture that's not pretty. Lonely women on their own, drinking. We've been sold such a bill of goods that it's a glamorous life, that it's the only way to relax, reward, and celebrate. And I certainly bought into it. What's really scary, I think, is that as I broke the story on the pinky of the alcohol market, that sometime in the 1990s, the alcohol industry said, Johnny Walker drinkers are dying out. What are we going to do? They looked and did market segmentation and said a whole gender is underperforming. We saw the pinking of the alcohol products. So we saw mummy juice and girls' night out vodka and pitching very hard at women, and women bought it. And there was a sense of equality. I deserve it. I work hard, go toe to toe with men in the workplace. Why shouldn't I?
I know. I just hate that, the way that they've hijacked the feminist movement. I fell for it. I was completely one of these ladettes we used to call ourselves in the UK. We thought, oh, we're equal. We can drink as much as the guys. And it completely backfired because our bodies aren't the same as the guys, are they? We have so much more
Oh,
body fat rather than water. So it's not diluting the alcohol. Many
right.
reasons why we can't drink like the guys. You explained in your book is they took the cigarette marketing playbook, didn't they? And they
They
applied
did.
it.
They
I
did.
mean, really, they've done a stunning job. Sometimes my jaw drops with admiration about how they've managed to manipulate most of the females in the world. We've fallen for it.
We've fallen for it. We've
Yes.
fallen for it. And I think the mummy drinking culture is especially difficult. I will say, as the daughter of a the eldest daughter of a female alcoholic, a beautiful woman, my mother, she was absent and worse. And that's very hard on kids.
Yeah.
I think if we look at the whole picture of family,
Mm.
it's disastrous.
Yeah. Yeah. And the mommy juice isn't a new thing. My son is 42 now. And I remember children's parties when he was little, and we were all on the bubbly, and the kids were all on the sugar, and everybody was running around quite happy. So it's
Right.
not a new thing. But what is new is the sophistication of the marketing. What did I see the other day? That mom water. I mean, that
Oh,
really is scandalous. So mommies are supposed to just pack a couple of cans of this pretty looking drink in their bag along with all the baby stuff and take a little swig and they're drinking vodka. Unbelievable, isn't it? And this company is doing so well. Did you notice? They've sold something like 1 million cases. I think they're going public or they have gone public and they're making a fortune. And it's
wow.
shocking, isn't it? Because it's just
Yes,
vodka
it's
and
shot.
water. Yeah, I think 4.5% alcohol it is. I mean, it's
Terrible.
no joke. Parenting is stressful. I remember it well. Um, but really, we got to find other ways to deal with our stress, haven't we? And we've got to stop modeling alcohol as a coping mechanism because kids take it all in, don't they?
They do. I have to say, I'm not a prohibitionist. I certainly enjoyed alcohol for a long time, and it is fun, but it's the ultimate decompression tool for people who are women who are overworked and overburdened. And certainly during the pandemic when people were homeschooling, and
Oh,
I just shook my head because children were at home, women were drinking at home more. And I grew up with that, and it's not pretty.
no, I'll never forget your description of your mum coming down the corridor with the ice clinking. So sad.
Yes.
Yeah. So if there's a mommy listening to this is beginning to think, I wonder if I'm relying on my wine a little bit too much. What do you think are the red flags? When should she start thinking about making a change?
I meet so many women who say, I think I might have to change, but I don't know. And I always say two things. I say, are you drinking to numb? And usually they know exactly what they're numbing. And then the second thing I say is take a week, keep a journal, write down in the morning what you're going to have that night. See if you can keep your promises. 9 times out of 10, people can't keep their promises. So start again the next day. And usually by the end of the week, they've got a pretty clear picture that they need to either scale back or quit. But it's enormously hard in our culture.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
enormously hard.
Yeah. Really, if we're thinking that we might be drinking too much, the odds are that we are. And
Yes,
yeah, I get lots of people coming to our workshops and they say, "Oh, I want to learn to moderate." And
I
we
know.
say, "Sorry, can't help." Because if you can moderate, you moderate. I can't teach you to moderate. Racers, I don't think alcohol's even on their radar. I know because I'm married to one. He used to drink to keep me company. And ever since
Wow.
I quit, he hardly ever drinks. It just doesn't occur to him because he's a natural moderator. But I say to people, because they don't wanna hear that sometimes, they say, "Oh, just I want to try." So I say, "Try to moderate, use the techniques that we teach, but if you keep trying and failing, then give yourself a break. Just accept that you've crossed a line into dependence and there's no going back." And what we have to do is put all that energy that we put into trying to moderate into building an alcohol-free life that we love. Because that takes a lot of work, as we both know it takes time, it takes work, it takes energy, it takes creativity. And we need to focus our energy on that. Yeah, I think if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I wonder if I'm drinking too much, then try to moderate, but don't go on for 11 years because that's the average, isn't it? According to that Tempest survey, that
Yes.
women, we spend about 11 years in that bargaining place where we think, oh, maybe I've got a problem, maybe I haven't, maybe I'll drink less. And then we make all the rules. your rules were in your book. I just thought,
Yeah,
we're all the same, aren't we? All the same. It's madness. And
madness.
yeah, yeah, 11 years is far too long. When I first heard that stat, I thought that sounds a bit long. But I thought about my own story, and I spent the entire of my 50s, which is when I started to recognize I was seriously dependent. I was trying to cut down, trying to cut down. I couldn't even contemplate stopping altogether. I thought, my God, what would life be like if you can't have a glass of wine? How miserable is that? I couldn't
Yes.
imagine that. So I
Yeah.
thought, I'm a really strong person. I achieve everything I want to achieve. I can do this. I'll just drink within the guidelines, which at the time in the UK were a bottle and a half of wine a week. So I used to try to drink within those limits, and I could actually white knuckle it for as long as 2 weeks sometimes. And then there'd be a night and the wheels would come off and I'd drink till I blacked out. And then there we go again, the guilt and the blame. It's such a depressing and exhausting place to be in.
In my book, I call it the modern woman's steroid,
Yeah.
enabling to do the heavy lifting of a complex world. And I try and create a shame-free zone because there is so much shame.
Yeah.
I was a blackout drinker. We can also fall down the shame bunny hole, which is very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I say to people, it's not us that are the bad guys here. No, it's big alcohol. Blame
Yeah.
them if you want to blame somebody. I've been quite good at ditching the shame. I decided I wasn't going down that route. But a lot of women that I work with, a year into their sobriety, they still say things like, "Oh, I'm so ashamed of some of the things that I did." And we have to let that go, don't we?
So much so.
It's not our fault. Yeah, we touched on limits there, didn't we? I wanted to congratulate your country. 2 drinks a week. That is amazing. What was the reaction?
Oh, it was terrible. It was Canada's place that funds gone to die. So the low risk drinking guidelines came out a year ago in January, and the ink in press it got around the world was amazing. We set the bar. WH very, very laudatory. The US is looking at copying, but essentially no alcohol is safe. 2 drinks a week, 2 measured drinks, so that's 2 5-ounce glasses of wine, for instance, is all that is safe. If you're 3 to 6, you're not safe. I got on a rotation of doing I think I did about 170 interviews in a couple of weeks. People over and over would say, "How are these gonna be received?" It was interesting because it caused a lot of buzz. People were angry and they were chatting, and they were angry because they were saying, "I work hard, I pay my taxes, I raise good kids. What I do on a Friday night is my business." And yet science the science was there. The science was there saying, "This is not healthy. This is a carcinogen. This is not healthy for you." And I think it's gonna take a generation for people to really accept that because we've been sold a load of goods that it's good for heart health. Not true. And that it's like vitamin D or omega-3s that you can have red wine and it's great for you. It's just baloney.
Talking of the
Right.
science, it was in 1988 that the World Health Organization first put out a report saying it was a number 1 carcinogen. And that information has been buried and gradually it's coming into the public domain, but it's taken, what, 50 years to get there?
Yes.
And then it's still not really out there, is it? I think if you stop the average woman in a wine bar enjoying a drink with her friends and said, "You know that stuff gives you cancer," I think she'd be horrified.
Would be. Would be.
It's
And as a news journalist, because I was a news journalist for 30 years, you have to look at the opioid crisis, certainly in North
yeah,
America, and say it steals all the thunder. It kills fewer people.
yeah,
It's terrifying, tragic, but alcohol kills more people.
yeah. 3 million a year, isn't it? Oh, and
Yeah.
when I interviewed Professor Stockwell, and he told me that was a vast underestimate in his view, and that it's more like 6 million. Think
Well,
how many people died in COVID and what happened. The whole world ground to a halt, didn't it? Every
yes,
night, the governments of various countries were taking prime airtime with all their little charts, how many people in hospital, how many people died. And alcohol kills more people than that every year, and nothing ever changes. The old marketing machine just keeps cranking out the bullshit. It's
yeah,
amazing when you
yes,
compare it with COVID. Um,
yes,
and hard drugs, yeah. I don't know if you ever saw that study that Professor Nuts from the UK
yes.
published. Yeah. Anyway, he said, didn't he, that on the top 10 of harmful drugs, alcohol came in at number 4, but the charts which ranked the drugs which did most harm to society rather than the individual, which the other one was about, number 1. Certainly here in South Africa, we saw that in the alcohol bans because they banned alcohol. I think they did it 4 times, and the hospitals emptied so the COVID patients could go in,
Wow.
started selling alcohol again, and then all the casualties, the gunshots and the car crashes started again. It's mind-boggling, really.
It is mind-boggling.
I think your book, amongst many other things, it started the conversation, didn't it? It started to smash the stigma a little bit about women drinking. And there's now what I think is absolutely wonderful is there's such a modern recovery movement, isn't there? When
It's
I
great.
when I
Wonderful.
stopped drinking 9 years ago, there was nothing actually, certainly here in South Africa. I know AA worked fabulously for you. I didn't like it. I went to a few groups here in South Africa, but it was very male dominated and I just couldn't find my people. And I think that's what we have to do in recovery. Our
Yes.
people. And that's what's wonderful these days, because I think everybody can find their people. You need to get online and look at all the various groups out there, and you'll find something that'll resonate with you. So that's brilliant.
The big news is that I'll go back to AA. Once my book came out and the first sentence being hang out in the rooms of AA, I was no longer welcome. So I actually am with the Luckiest Club now, with Laura McCowan, and I'm a host on Sunday morning meetings for women only. And I just love the generosity of the community, the support of the community, the breadth and international element of the community. I'm at home. I'm at home and it's very powerful.
Oh,
And I love the fact that there are many choices in modern recovery. When I got sober, you could walk down some pretty dingy stairs in a church basement and drink bad coffee. And now there's all sorts of options. That's very different.
and alcohol-free drinks, of course. There's so many now. There was
It's
nothing
a
again.
Yes, it's a booming industry, and we have beautiful alcohol-free bars, and we have a younger generation that is interested in going to those bars and considers it fun,
Yeah.
and it's a radically different universe. Those are
Yeah.
the good news bits.
Yeah, the good news, yeah. And the young ones, if you go on Instagram, the young sober influencers, they're all over it. It's
I know it's
oh.
terrific.
Yeah, going back to Laura, we're all great fans of Laura McCowan here at Tribe Sober. And we've read her book, We Are the Luckiest. And we often say that to people because when people join Tribe Sober, sometime you might come across people like this yourself. I identify with them personally. They're actually quite depressed. And I remember when I realized I had to give up drinking for my health, I was depressed. I thought, that's it, my life's over. But
I know.
fortunately, I was already quite old then. So I thought, I've done lots of partying. I'll just stay home and read my books. So anyway, far from it. But we say to these people that join with a long face, we say, you know what? Don't be depressed. Get excited because you've got an opportunity ahead of you. You've got a challenge. You've got an opportunity and you cannot see how this will pan out. But if you keep drinking, it's like Groundhog Day. You'll be in the same old rut for the rest of your
Oh,
life.
yes. Oh,
Give up
yes.
drinking and your whole world will open up. The first thing that happens is you'll start enjoying everyday pleasures again because we lose that ability. All we want is more drinks, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
you've got bandwidth to really enjoy
yeah,
life.
yeah. So that's why I just love the title of the online community and the book, because we are the luckiest. And I think that's the premise of her book, isn't it? That we're actually luckier than all those normal drinkers that we used to envy because they could just have one or two drinks and leave it. Because they don't get forced to the wall. They don't get forced to look at their lives and deconstruct and rebuild their life. So we are the luckiest. And I certainly feel very lucky these days that it happens to me. It was such a catalyst for change.
Beautiful. And I think it's interesting that we don't necessarily go back to who we were, but get
No,
to cherry pick who we want to be
yeah,
and how we want to spend all that extra time that we gain back, all the extra time that you
yeah,
spent drinking and
yeah.
hangovers and uh, being ashamed and making amends with people. We have none of that.
Yeah, we had a Zoom meeting yesterday and that we just check in with people. How are they doing? We had one lady, a Japanese lady, and she was saying that for the first time in decades, she feels in touch with her body and she realizes that she's had chronic neck pain for years and she's just been ignoring it, numbing it away. And now she's gone to a chiropractor and he's released the problem and she just feels like a different person. And she started to do yoga. She always thought that she could never do yoga because she's too hyper. But now she can calm down. She can do yoga. And another lady has said that she was at a meeting, a Zoom meeting. It was for work. I think it was some kind of board meeting. And there was a woman there that was a bit of a bully and she was being rude to the woman that was at our meeting. And she was saying that has often happened over the years, but she'd been drinking and she would just put up with it and try and brush it off. And that night she would have lots of extra drinks to calm herself. But this time she actually fought back. She was quite assertive and she said, I'm sorry, guys, but I'm not going to be spoken to this any longer. She's now about 6 months sober. She's just finding her feet. And it's quite a funny story because she decided she was going to leave the meeting, switched it off. But what she forgot was she was the host of this big important meeting and they all got kicked out. So that's yes. And but we were deconstructing this afterwards, and we realized that what we do is we get back in touch with our authentic self because it takes away our confidence, doesn't it, as well, alcohol? It makes us more submissive than we are naturally. And
Yes.
that's why it's done the feminist movement such a disservice, I think, because it's kept us subdued when we should be fighting.
Yes, I agree. It's
Yeah.
kept us very subdued on our own in the kitchen,
Yeah.
in the living room, sitting on the couch, drinking in an isolated way, which is what women do. We ritualize and we drink in an isolated way.
Yeah, and that's what Susan Christina always says, isn't it? Put down your glass and take back your power. I love that. So we've talked about the marketing playbook from tobacco being applied, and we all know what happens to tobacco finally. My personal experience with tobacco was that I smoked my head off in my 20s. I worked at the BBC and we worked in
Ah,
this basement, no ventilation, and we all used to smoke. And we would take out a cigarette and toss it around to our neighbour. We'd be at it all day. That there was a fog in that room. I can still see it today. And we didn't know it was bad for you. We didn't know. And then one day in the UK, they banned the advertising for cigarettes. So it was all over the paper, and we were looking at the news. We were at the BBC, we were breaking the news. And we thought, oh my God, this stuff gives us lung cancer. And we all stopped smoking. Why would you smoke if you knew? That's my thing about education, because You talk beautifully about those 3 levers. Let's see if I can remember them. It's price, cut down on marketing, and availability.
That's right.
But those levers, we all have to wait for government to act. But many governments, they're just relying on the taxes, aren't they? They want us to drink, so they're not really going to get with the program. So I
No.
think it has to come as well from the individual, and it has to be education. And that's
Yeah.
why what we do is great, because some people will listen and learn and gradually take it on board. I say
Yeah.
to people when they start on this journey that they've got to treat it like a job. They've got to obsess over sobriety because there is so much to it. It's fascinating. I'm still learning from my podcast guests 9 years in. There's so much. It's science, it's psychology, it's biology. And there is so much to learn. And I think the more we learn about what this stuff does to our brains and our bodies, the less we're going to want to consume it. So
Yeah.
if people really dive in and get with all the knowledge out there, which is accessible, because I was thinking about your mum, think about your mum a lot, because she just makes me think of those characters in Mad Men and the wives at home. And she couldn't get on her computer and Google, is Valium and my cocktail a good mix? She couldn't educate
No.
herself. But now we've got it all at our fingertips.
Yeah.
Just educate yourself, is what I say to people all the time.
Yes.
Sorry, I went off on a rant there. What I was trying to ask you
Yes.
is
Good rant.
nothing like a good rant, is there? Is alcohol heading for a cigarette moment?
It's such a good question. I think that it's going to take a generation. I traveled across North America and spoke to a lot of women, young women mostly, sometimes young men in campuses, college campuses. I was trying to say, you're being hoodwinked. There is an enormous, back to your political comment, enormous amount of lobbying in every government by the alcohol industry, by big alcohols. So you're being hoodwinked, you're being told lies. And I got real pushback from every set of young people saying, you got to drink, it's our turn. So I think people have to wake up and see that the price that they're going to pay is enormous. So you have mummies on drinking play dates, and then something bad happens. I always knew when I quit that it wasn't going to be a glamorous death, but I was going to die. Fall and hit my head on a coffee table, fall down some stairs, but it was going to kill me. I knew that. Yeah, but is the culture going to wake up enough and say that this thing that is celebrated in movies and celebrated on television? People will even say to me, I'm not marketed to. And I say, it's because it's the wallpaper. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Are we going to change? I believe the person in my book who says it's going to be 30 years.
Wow.
Because the low risk drinking guidelines last year in Canada, it did have some effect. I saw dry January had more of an uptake this year, but it's a lot more than quitting for a couple of weeks. You have to write your goodbye letter. If you don't do it physically, you have to in your heart. You have to develop some new habits. You have to be very strong and walk into every social event with something in your hand. I always say, become an interviewer. Just when somebody says, oh, surely you could have one, say, how are the kids? How's your work? Change the subject and just, yeah. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to change overnight.
Yeah.
We are an alcoholic culture.
We've got to stay alive for another 30 years. We deserve to see this.
Yes, I would love to see it.
I used to do a dry January every year, but I used to do it to prove to myself that I wasn't an alcoholic. And I would become aware of dry January by about October, because in the UK, the Christmas lights would come on in September. So it was in your head all the time that it was Christmas coming, coming. And I would think, oh no, that means dry January. And I would dread it, but I would do it. But come February, I was eager to make up for lost time, and all I was doing it is white knuckling it. So that was counterproductive for me, because now that I understand more, I think my subconscious was absorbing the fact that sobriety was miserable and boring, and it was something just to be got through until you
Yeah.
could have a drink again. The other reason why you need a longer break than that, if you must have a break, is that you're not really going to experience many benefits. We recommend 66 days because you can build a neural pathway in that time, but it has to be longer than dry January. And going back to marketing, Anne, I interviewed a guy the other day that told me that he'd done a study about how often alcohol appeared in movies and television series. And over the last 20 years, it's increased by 96%.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I
Mm,
believe it.
yeah. I'm wondering if maybe the movie budgets are a little bit stretched these days. They want to be sponsored by big alcohol that have got trillions to spend on it all, haven't they?
Yes. Yes. Who knows?
Let's talk about your courses, writing your recovery courses. You write
Yeah.
beautifully, so I think it's wonderful that you're giving people an opportunity to at least get some tips from you. We're not all going to end up writing as well as you, sadly.
Oh, it's amazing the talent and the variety of talent. So, Writing Your Recovery is an 8 session course, 2 hours each on Zoom with me. And my attitude is you can be recovering from grief or recovering from alcohol or recovering from both, recovering from eating disorders, doesn't matter what. And I designed a course that I needed, which is how do you break writer's block? How do you get started? If you've got a memoir, if you want an essay in a newspaper, how do you get published? We do a ton of writing and sharing, and it's all women. It's very tight groups who get to know each other and make friends, and we do retreats. And all in all, it's one of the greatest delights of my life to run it.
How long have you been running them now?
I've been running them now for 3 years. We have about 100 people who've gone through. I have one woman on her third book, a former lawyer, and sober woman on her third book, her second novel. Women really get a lot out of it. And we're starting another session, both for people who live internationally. There's a midday offering and an evening offering. I've had people from New Zealand, people from Berlin, people from all over the world. And it's just a lovely community, not too big, lots of intimacy, lots of time to talk and share.
Sounds fabulous. Talk to us about your South African retreat, as we've got lots
Yes.
of South African listeners out there.
Yes. I'm coming back to South Africa and in September, and in October, we'll be offering Writing Your Recovery, which is basically memories to memoir at Bodhikaya retreat, which I think is going to be wonderful. It'll be 5 days in a beautiful setting, offering the course in an intensive way. And I'm coming to write my next book, which will be an exploration of my mother and myself and the intergenerational trauma that led to drinking. I'm very interested in the self medicating that we do around drinking, a way to exit the world.
That's wonderful. We've got another book to look forward to. So 15 years sober. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
I know it's always hard to question this, but share with us your top 3 benefits.
My top 3 benefits would be that I went back to school at 64 to become a psychotherapist, and I've been able to do brave things such as write Drink, which was a way to break the stigma. We grew up with a secret, so called secret, about my mother's drinking. And so I've had adventures I wouldn't have had otherwise. I get to be the real, authentic Anne. That's number one. Number two, my granddaughter is 2 years old, and I wouldn't have been allowed to look after her, let alone have the kind of relationship that I have with her, which is the light of my life. And then the third thing is going to be something that's amorphous, which is I believe that if we're sober, if we don't fall down the neck of a bottle, that the universe has a better imagination than we do, and remarkable things happen, surprising things happen. I am awakened to a wonder, and that wasn't the way I was. I was very prescriptive when I was drinking and working very hard and coming home to unhitch my shoulders from my earlobes with my first glass of wine, often with my coat still on. This is a richer way of living.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. It's an adventure, isn't it? We don't know what's going to happen. And when we're functioning alcoholics with a job to do and a family to bring up, it takes so much energy just to keep the show on the road. And we're
Yeah.
determined to look fine so that nobody will guess our dirty little secret. That's what takes all our time and energy, doesn't it? Just to control everything. And when we stop and when we're finally free, it takes a few months, certainly a little more to get there. But then your shoulders do come down and you are awake to opportunities. You're up for it. You want to try everything and we get curious, don't we? And brave. Look at my
Embrace.
t-shirt. It says fearless.
Fearless. There you go. I love it.
So how can people find out more about you? You've got a website?
Yes. It's my name, Johnston .com. And it has the workshops, the courses there, and it has some of my writing there, and a reminder of my book and my TEDx talk and all things that you might be interested in.
Your book, Drink, is still available on Amazon. Yeah.
Yes, it's all selling like crazy,
Yeah, it's
which is
fantastic.
amazing.
But if someone's listening to this and they know that they've got to do something about their drinking because they're drinking to self-medicate and they know they're in trouble, how do they get started? Because I think that's the most difficult thing, isn't it? Psyching yourself up and getting started.
Yes, I suggest three things. I think taking it one day at a time is definitely key. And for me, it was one morning, one afternoon, and one evening at a time. I did a lot of napping. I did a lot of sleeping, a lot of going to bed early to get the benefits of healing my body and also just ducking out of the drinking time. I did that, number one. Number two, I really want you to be muscular with a gratitude journal because the science on gratitude is enormous. I wish I'd taken more notes when I was newly sober because it's a fascinating experience to downshift from drinking into sobriety. So, a gratitude journal will not just for things that are wonderful, but for the negative as well. So, gratitude's number two. And number three is tattoo on your wrist, metaphorically. The universe has a better imagination.
Yeah.
Trust that.
Yeah.
Trust that. The community of women, such as the wonderful community you've put together, and many others, is so important to heal, to have new friends, to grow, and to realize that this is doable.
Yeah.
Not
Yes.
only doable, but enviable.
Yeah. And worth every moment of pain, really.
Yes.
Yeah, you say that about trusting the universe. There's a lovely quote by Martin Luther King, which is take the first step on the staircase, even if you don't know where the staircase is going. And I
Oh,
think
that's lovely.
that sums up this journey, doesn't it?
Yes,
Aw-
it
aw-
does.
Awesome. Anything else you think we should mention, Anne? Anything that we haven't covered that you want to say?
I can't overestimate what has happened in terms of communities, the kind of community that you've put together and the leadership that you've shown and others have shown. This is radical. We are in the middle of a revolution and it's our time.
Yeah.
It is our time. What the general public does and What big alcohol does, I can't predict. They will continue to lobby, give across party lines. I have no doubt. But there is so much support and community connection to live a different way. And it's been a miracle for me. It's been a miracle for me because I lost both parents. Is not a pretty death. I just think we're very fortunate that we have options and we have a whole literature of quitlet and we have groups like yours and community